What's up, YouTube fam? How you guys doing today? Clint coming live from the shop garage, whatever. And you go, Smudge! Got it. So, just to come straight out about the title. No, I did not. This was brought up and proposed to be a video because there is quite a large variety of riders out there. And Suzuki, as a lot of you know, some of you maybe didn't. Let me put you up here. Suzuki didn't do so good in the shootouts and test rides. Now, what you guys need to realize is when they set up, now I've been at several of these shootouts when they do the 450 shootouts. So there will be a magazine, I won't name any, but they'll hire riders before they even come out. These riders already have their chosen bike that they click with. Usually if they're a good enough rider to be in a test mag, they have already bought that year model bike, made a decision on it, or they have the previous year model, but they're a little biased. So I think I've been getting lots of questions like, why did you pick Suzuki? Why didn't you go with this make? Why didn't you go with that one? What are you going to do about this? And you know, all I can tell you guys, and especially like I got a little bit of hounding, which I expected from people saying like, you know, why would you buy a Suzuki instead of my 16 Yamaha? I'm 5'10", 238 pounds. I'm not a light bite. I'm a heavy guy, and I've reworked the suspension on my Yamaha, and I've got it cherry enough to where if I dive into a corner, the bike, because it's so top heavy and because the gyro on the bike, and it's got a really abrupt power band, which some people like, some people don't. And as a matter of fact, when I first got the bike, it was too abrupt that I had to contact DRD and ask them how I could tame it down a little bit. Because, guys, I'm not a pro rider. I'm not even a expert rider for that matter. I'm somewhere in between C and B class. You know, it's like I could race either one and have fun. So I had to look at the long-term goal and picture of buying the Suzuki. Now, someone with a big pocketbook can definitely buy a 16 Yamaha, being similar stature as me, spend the money on triple clamps, rear links, get the DRD lowering kit for the radiators and for the engine, and maybe get your subframe cut. You can do things, obviously, to make that bike work for you. So I am not saying in any way that the RMZ, the 18 RMZ, is better than the 16 or 17 YZ450F, because everyone is different. Now, one of the bad decisions that I did make in getting the Suzuki is I did not try it first. I went off of a few things that made up that decision. The first was price. The price point was just right for me to make a decision based on how much I'm going to be putting into the bike at a general cost. Then I looked at the other things. I looked at what collectively all the shootouts were saying. They did not like the balance-free rear cushion shock, but all of them are required to report on the bike based on how it comes from the factory. Yes, you can dial in settings, you can dial in sag. They don't change tires, they don't swap links, they don't change triple clamps, they don't do anything other than test the base bike just how it comes. So, having said that, they felt that the RMZ, its best trait was it cuts like a surgeon's knife. And my Yamaha already cannot do that. And even just I've only put like 30 minutes, if that, breaking this thing in, and it's not even, I still got, you know, according to the Suzuki manual, they want, you know, an hour of riding at not much more than quarter throttle, and then another hour riding of not much more than half throttle, and then in which you can start to bump it up. So I put a half an hour on of going like quarter to half. I kind of broke the rules a little bit, but don't worry, I'm not hurting the bike. I did very small motos, like 5-minute moto, came off, let it rest for 20, and then, you know, wait till the engine was warm to the touch. Skipping that. Things like the rear shock on this one. I try to pick apart what factory's intent was compared to what the test riders felt. So I can say from experience, I've had several new bikes the year of the launch or the year after the launch. I've had like my Yamaha's a 16. Before that, I had a 13 CRF 450, and then before that, I had a 14 YZ250F. Now, for me, that 13 CRF was the best turning bike I've ever had until this point. I feel like already with the short amount of time that I've put on the Suzuki, it outturns the Honda in that 13 to 16 platform for me. So don't get that crossed. If you have that bike and it works amazing for you, fantastic. That's kind of why I wanted to make this video, guys, is I want you guys to understand that price point, part availability, ease to work on, and honestly, when it comes down to it, like the part price and the promotion package that Suzuki had in getting sponsored with the RM Army at the same time, there's some really cool kickbacks. Sure, I mean, some people might think that they're minuscule, but I think that they're beneficial to me. So, you know, things like RM Army, they're kind of new to the game. Team Green's been at it for a long time. Ride Red's been at it for a long time. And Blue Crew is actually kind of new. Orange Brigade for KTM, and I can't remember the one for Husqvarna. But all these have amateur programs, and these guys will pay you if you up to top 5 or 6 in some races just for being on their bike. So there is a little bit payback. They do send you some cool swag. Like I'm getting a easy up canopy for this, a Suzuki RM Army one. I'm getting a RM Army credit card with some cash on it, and it's like all that stuff, you know, is whatever. You know, but in my opinion, I feel like as far as a starting platform for me, I needed something that first like turned me off of my current bike, which was a turning. I just can't get that YZ450F to turn for me. The other thing was the power. The power has always been too abrupt on the YZ450 for me. I had to call DRD. They sent me a different header, and they sent me a map to try with the header, and it did. It brought that hit out and made the power more linear. And the power is no longer an issue with that. I love the power on it, but it seems like I just can't get the thing to turn. So having said that, the bike being such a low hour, it's at like 30 hours, I figured it would be a good time now, before the hours kept climbing, to be able to sell that bike and use that to pay off the new. And that's going to be able to happen for the price that I got the Suzuki for and how much I'm going to sell the YZF for. It should pay off 3/4 of how much I spent on the Suzuki, which is great with me. So now, things like Kawasaki, which is also at the bottom of the list. Suzuki was last place in some of the magazine shoots. Kawasaki was last place in some of the shoots. Some people put Honda before KTM Suzuki, or excuse me, KTM Husky, and others put KTM Husky, then Honda. There's a lot of bias, guys. And so they use these 6 riders to test each bike, and then they come to a common consensus on what they like in their bike. And that's how they build their results. Now, if you ask each rider individually, list down your top 5. You better make sure that that rider is a similar ability to you, size as you, riding style as you, I mean, across the board, because that's the one that you want to match yourself to. Now, there's professionals on YouTube like Jay Clark, David Pingray, that, you know, they do write-ups and reviews on bikes, and they have nothing but great things to say about Suzuki, other than the BFRC rear shock on this is a little hard to get dialed in first. They end up running a little extra sag to get the shock to sit lower, because right now the bike wants to stink bug a little bit. So they take some sag out of the back to get the rear end lower, and then the bike really stays planted. That was one of the major concerns. So there is companies like Ride Engineering, Deval, I can name them all day, that make rear links for this thing that helps bring down the rear. So you don't have to mess with your sag. You can still keep a 104, 105, whatever you like sag number, and still keep the positive feeling out of the bike. And then you can do things like power adders. I don't personally want to change the power. I love the power straight out of the box. I did put the rich coupler on, as a matter of fact, for break-in, to kind of keep the heat off the valves for one. I do know that the rich valve is a slower map, but it's for me to... I know bikes, when they run rich, they run differently for break-in, and that's what I wanted to do. I definitely don't want it running lean for break-in. So I have the rich coupler in now, and I'm pretty sure after I have it all broken in, after a couple hours... I do have RockyMountainATVMC.com is sending me a hour meter and some other goodies for it, and I am waiting for those so I could get an hour meter on and have a really good idea of when the engine's finally broken in. And finally, guys, I'm going to end with ergonomics. Ergonomics are how the bike feels just by sitting on it. Bar height, grips, peg location, and then whether a bike feels thick or skinny, and whether or not you can feel at home when you're on the chassis. So things like that. A lot of people bragged and loved how out of the box Suzuki felt skinny. I wanted something skinny for once. I've always had this fat Yamaha, and it's nice to have something more skinny between your legs, and it's like a night and day difference for the flickability of the bike, and it just feels so much more nimble. And so that's why, guys, I had to make this now lengthy. I didn't mean it to be so long, but point to this video. So having said that, guys, I appreciate a lot of the comments. I appreciate a lot of your concerns. And at the same time, I appreciate your criticism, because honestly, in this world where we really have KTM, Husqvarna, Suzuki, Yamaha, Honda, Kawasaki, we got the big six, they call them. And then now, slowly Alta's starting to work their way in. We don't see a lot of Shercos, Gas, Beta. We don't see a lot of those other brands coming into these shootouts because they don't really have an MX ready bike. A lot of them kind of focus to enduro or off-road. Some of them do have, like TM, I know has a good motocross bike, but that's not a general consumer bike. And in closing, guys, I just want to say that whatever you guys decide to go with, whether it's a Suzuki or a Honda, Yamaha, KTM, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's what you're willing to spend, how much you're willing to put into it, and then look at the big picture. How long are you planning to keep it? A lot of guys, professionals especially, will run a bike for 3 to 6 months and then sell it. They'll lose maybe about $1,000 on what they paid, but then they look at, I rented a bike for 3 to 6 months for $1,000, depending on who, and then they'll put 30 hours on it or so, and they'll sling it, and then they go and they buy another freshie, and then they'll just pay $1,000 more. I didn't want to do that. I don't want to do that. My 16 YZ I got last year, and I put 1,000, I put 30 hours in 1 year on it. I barely rode because of my kids, and because honestly I never really felt at home on the bike, so much so that I wanted to put in more laps. It was kind of more like I'd go out and just be like, oh, that was sketchy, I think I want to go in, and I would go in, I'd make little tweaks on suspension, I'd go back out, I'd be like, okay, that was better, and then I'd hit something and lose a front end crash or whatever. So this ultimately, this decision was to find a nice long-term bike for myself that I know first priority has to turn better. I already know that the Suzuki's engines are solid. I've owned Suzuki's in the past. They're solid bikes. And lastly, I mean, the suspension, I can, for as much as I spent, I could still go. I mean, KTM sold here in the States for like $12,900 for like a factory edition KTM 450. I paid less than half of that, and I'm still, so, $6,000 I can spend on suspension if I want to, which I could promise you I'm not going to, but, you know, I'm not even going to spend a fraction of that. But at least I got a platform for me to start on for a good price that, honestly, at the end of the day, I'm stoked about, and it makes me happy every time I look at it. So having said that, guys, if you want to, you know, stop there. Otherwise, I'm going to flip around and show you what we got going on. Just got done out at Castillo's. We're getting ready for Seattle Supercross this weekend. So I got Addie's bike here, gonna get it all tuned up for tomorrow. We got another day of practice out at the ranch, and I think Colt Nick's gonna be there again, and Tyler Custer and Carlin Gardner, along with Adam Antiknap, and I don't know who else is going to be stopping through on their way up to Seattle. A lot of SoCal guys do drop in on their way up to get a practice in. Right now I have the shop's pretty full of whatever, but anyways, I gotta move it into the trailer, get working on it. I got all my setup in there now, which is nice, guys, and bought, you know. I'm brand bought, right? But that combo, guys, for me, like I said, works great. But anyways, so this is, the Yami is going up for Snail, and you know, it's a 16. I'm gonna pull all the graphics off of it, and underneath is just all the original graphics that come screen printed on the plastics, which I always thought was really cool. And it's extremely low hour. I'm going to be asking $5,000 for it, and I think I should be able to get that. If not, you know, I'll dip down a little bit, but within reason, of course. So I need to get Addie's bike ready for tomorrow, pull this KTM into the trailer, do the tires. Robus's bike got a full engine rebuild, and other than it being extremely loud, it runs fantastic. And then I got some engine rebuilds to do as well, and I'm going to be moving all this stuff into the trailer, which is going to be nice to have a setup in there that I can take to the tracks and stuff like that. So I am going to get a big London X logo to go right here in the middle. And then I also got a suggestion to not solely brand myself to Suzuki, but actually throw in, you know, Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, or, you know, whatever, and so people don't think that I'm just solely a Suzuki mechanic, because I'm not. I'll work on everything, and I do work on everything. So having said that, guys, I'm going to cut the video there. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that it gave you guys a little insight when buying a bike, choosing a bike, and just not to be bought, guys. Don't be bought by what these magazine shootouts are telling you, because a lot of times they're very biased, and other times you know, the writers are the ones being the bias, not really the magazine, because the magazine wants to get a good general idea of, you know, of the comparison of the bikes. They want to get a good idea for the consumer, but I can tell you from experience, the writers are definitely biased. So anyways, guys, I'm going to cut it there. Love every single one of you. I'm going to be vlogging tomorrow for prepping for Seattle, and I'm going to be out the track, so keep your eyes open for a video tomorrow. Anyways, from Shot Garage Whatever, this is Clint Lund with Lund MX. Talk to you guys later. Deuces.